Shadowrek here. Today's video is going to be going over the talent trees for Havoc. This video will specifically be for the Demon Hunter class side of the tree, rather than the spec side and the hero talents. That will be left for a different video, and I will have that linked in the description below, and vice versa. Now, this video is not going to be for everyone. This is mostly for either people that are new to the class, don't know it, and are just starting to learn it, or for people that simply don't read their talent trees, which is a lot more common than you may expect. If you do have a good understanding of Havoc, there might be a couple interactions, especially in the spec tree, that you might learn about, but this is mostly geared for people that are learning the spec or just want to know more about the talents that we run and why. Now, starting from top left and just going to work my way right and then go down row by row. And again, this is just going to be the class side of the tree in this video. First, we have Vengeful Retreat. This is given to you. You're not actually talenting into this, just by being Havoc you get it. And Vengeful Retreat just is your button that flips you backwards and removes snares. Now, snares are not roots. I'm not really sure why snares have a distinction from slows, but it does not remove slows or roots. You can't press Vengeful if you're rooted. Snares are a different kind of slow. We have a snare in our tree further down to the tree that I'll go over later, but specifically snares get removed by Vengeful Retreat, which works on certain mechanics. Next, Blazing Path. This is just Fel Rush gains an additional charge. That's why we have 2 charges of Fel Rush, and you need to take this for paving reasons in pretty much all scenarios. You could technically drop it, but I would not really ever recommend doing so. Having 2 charges of Fel Rush is incredibly useful. Next is Sigil of Misery. Now, Sigil of Misery is a disorient of sorts. It isn't a regular disorient. It's actually a fear that forces you to stand in place, and it actually disables you from being moved. I'm not sure why Sigil of Misery has that, but that's why we can use this talent in situations like at the start of Dark Flame Cleft, the mobs that knock back. You can actually send your Sigil of Misery to misery the mobs right before that slam goes off, and they can't actually be knocked by it. So that's something that's useful to know. It is also useful to know that if you try to use it on a mob that you're trying to, say, get a Death Knight to grip, the grip will fail. It'll just get used and it won't actually pull the mob, so good to understand that that's a thing. Going back over to the left side, we have a talent that makes Vengeful Retreat slow movement speed of enemies by 70% for 3 seconds. This is just in the little AoE that it does and hits enemies with. We don't really take this in any scenario because we don't really have a talent point for it, and it's so niche that you never really would use it anyway. Next, Unrestrained Fury, we take this at all times. This just takes our max fury from 100 to 120, at least as Aldrachi. You play with 170 as Felscar due to a talent that you take in there. Shattered Restoration. This is for Shattered Souls, and this is both the souls that drop from mobs. Anytime you kill a mob, there's a chance it'll drop you a soul, and that soul heals you for 20% of your health bar if it's from a mob dying. That's a full Shattered Soul fragment, and this will increase it from 20% to 22. That healing amount doesn't get increased by verse or other healing increases, so this is the only actual way to increase that. For our lesser souls, these are the ones that are shattered off by, say, Chaos Striking or using our sigils, like Sigil of Spite. Those ones heal you for 6% of your health bar, so that goes up to 6.6. Improved Sigil of Misery just drops the cooldown of Sigil of Misery from 2 minutes to 1.5. Situationally, you could take it, but Sigil of Misery isn't really useful enough of a talent to be worth the point here. Not really something that's in contention. Bouncing Glaives makes it so throw Glaive ricochets and hits a 3rd target instead of only hitting 2. And for Aldrachi, that also makes your Reaver's Glaive hit 4 instead of 3. We take this in all scenarios. I mean, you need it to get down to Chaos Nova as well, which in any situation outside of Raid you're going to need. And if you're not playing in absolute pure single target, you're probably just going to want to take Bouncing Glaives. Again, you don't really have much to take instead of this point if you were to drop it. And in Mythic Plus or any other scenario, we always take Pro Glaive talent, so you will always just take this. Next is Imprison. And Imprison is an incapacitate, and it's one of the 2 true incapacitates in the game. The only other one that works like Imprison is Sap. The downside to it is we can only use it on demons, beasts, and humanoids. You can't imprison any other mob. And you can only have 1 out at a time, so it's got a 45-second cooldown and lasts for a minute. If you CC another mob while your original one is still up, it will overwrite it. It doesn't break instantly on damage anymore like it used to. Fortunately, it has a bit of a damage threshold before the effect breaks, so if you imprison a mob and it gets a dot put on it, it likely won't break anymore. Now, the thing that's really good about Imprison and why I said it was a true incapacitate is if you imprison a mob, you and anyone else in your group can walk over that mob and it will not be put in combat. If that mob is social to something else in a pack it's in, like say at the start of Priory, if you imprison part of the 4 soldiers right in the first pull, you won't get in combat with that mob if you get too close to it, the one that you imprison, but if you pull any other mob in that pack, it will be in combat with you, and when Imprison ends, it will run at you. Because it's part of the pack that got pulled, you can't just keep it permanently out of combat that way. But it's good for skips. Anytime there's a mob too close to you, you can just send Imprison on it so your group can walk past. And it works differently from, say, like Freezing Trap or Paralysis, where if someone walks too close, it gets in combat, and when that effect ends, the mob will run at them. So Prison's really good for that, and it's a unique thing that TH does have. Again, only Rogue has it as well with Sap. Our next talent is Charred Warblades. Charred Warblades is pretty good. You heal for 3% of all fire damage you deal, and this is not just fire damage. Chaos damage is every effective damage, so Charred Warblades does work on chaos damage as well. It's like Chaos Strike, your Blade Dance to primary target, Eye Beam, all of those do chaos damage, and 3% of the damage that you deal with that will be healed into you from Charred Warblades. This also ticks way faster than Leech, so it's a lot better than just effectively having 3% Leech. Leech ticks every 1.1 seconds, so it's really easy to die in a window between Leech ticks, but Charred Warblades ticks way more frequently, and you get that healing faster, so if it's in mass AoE, it helps your health bar stay more consistently topped, which can be good in some scenarios, and in general, it's just a good talent. Next, we have Chaos Nova. 45-second cooldown, just stuns enemies around you for 2 seconds. Downside with Chaos Nova is this effect and Metamorphosis are both stuns, so they do DR each other, as well as Fell Eruption. And the way that a DR works is it cuts the CC's value in half. The first and second DR value do that, and after 3 stuns are no longer effective. So if I Fell Eruption a target, and then I cast Meta, and then I want a Chaos Nova, this 2-second stun will go down to a half second because we have 3 different stuns and using them all in a row. And then if I use all 3 of those, including Chaos Nova, and someone else tries to stun after, the mob will not be able to be stunned until those DRs fall off. I think that takes about 25 seconds. And that's one problem with Havoc at the moment in M+, is especially playing Eldrachi where we want to use Chaos Nova for soul generation, which I'll get to in a moment. We can cause mobs to be fully stun DR'd, which can mess with stop rotations. Our next talent is Improved Disrupt. Disrupt is our interrupt, or our kick, and this increases the range from melee range, which is 5 yards, up to 10 yards. Actually incredibly useful in most scenarios. That extra 5 yards makes a big difference for being consistent with getting kicks, so pretty much every scenario we do end up taking this. Just a good talent all around. Next is Consume Magic. Now, Consume Magic is a purge, but it's only a purge on enemies. This isn't the same as like a Dispel. The way that this works is if there's a beneficial effect on the enemy, then you can purge it off of them, but it's only magic effects. This is not a de-enrage, so it doesn't work for enrage effects like a Soothe. There's not that many consumes that are useful this season, but if you think like the Kelps and Floodgate, their heal cast, you can purge that heal effect off of them. It does have a 10-second cooldown, and even if you fail to purge, it will still be a 10-second cooldown. Something you can use it for is if you need to tag a mob and pull it for your tank, but you don't want to have threat on it, you can use Consume Magic so that you didn't actually deal damage to it. Next is Eldrazi Design. That's just increased 3% chance to parry. There's not really anything great about this. It's could be niche useful in M+ to die slightly less to threat rips, but it's not really worth the talent point, and it's a struggle to find the talent points to spend to ever take it. This is more geared for Vengeance than it is for Havoc. Next, under Chaos Nova, we have Chaos Fragments. This makes it so any enemy that's stunned by Chaos Nova has a 30% chance to generate a Lesser Soul Fragment. These, for Eldrazi, feed into getting you Reaver's Glaive, so this is a really good talent to take a Mythic Plus and to actively use. And it's a true 30% chance per mob. So if you stun 5 mobs, you could get 0, you could get 5. If a mob is fully stun DR'd, as I mentioned earlier, if 3 stuns go off in a row and then you try to Chaos Nova, they won't get stunned by the Chaos Nova, and Chaos Fragments will not trigger. You will not be able to generate souls off them. Next is our choice node of Master of the Glaive and Champion of the Glaive. Both of them make it so Throw Glaive has 2 charges. This is good because when we do our meta combo, we Death Sweep back to back, and with Screaming Brutality, that does use a Throw Glaive charge. So having 2 charges is a DPS gain. And your 2 options are 10 yards increased range. This only works on manually casting it at a enemy. It does not increase the bounce range. That only increases the range of throwing the glaive itself from 30 to 40 yards. And there's Master of the Glaive. This is really good with our auto throw glaives because we throw so many out. It bounces to pretty much every enemy, so we can keep up a consistent 50% slow. That's the one I typically recommend. There's a couple scenarios where you may want to drop it if you don't want to be slowing mobs actively every time you hit Blade Dance. We have Disrupting Fury. This makes it so if you interrupt successfully, it generates 30 Fury. However, Fury is not that useful of a resource for us right now. We overcap an incredible amount, and this is typically never worth a point to take. There's no real good scenario to run it. After that, we have Fellblade. Fellblade is a 15-second cooldown, hasted, so it's reduced by your haste. And every time Demon Blades procs, which is off of our auto attacks, it has a chance to reset the cooldown. Fellblade also doesn't incur a full global cooldown. Instead of being your full global, it puts you on global cooldown for half of a second. That is not hasted, it's always a flat half second. And then it just does a little bit of damage, but it's mostly a fury generator. It will charge you to your target. It can be dangerous at times. So it's just our main core generator button. Next we have Swallowed Anchor. This is when you successfully consume magic and effect. You get 20 Fury, kind of the same as the interrupt point. Same issue, not really that useful, and consume magic's also a global. So you're typically never using it in a way that you're trying to use it for generating Fury, and it's just not a good talent point. We have Aura of Pain, which is a required must-take at all times. Increases the critical strike chance of Imora by 6%, and at least in any Mythic Plus builds, incredible value. That is one of our hardest hitting buttons. We have Live by the Glaive, which can only be taken if you do take Eldrazi Design. Same thing. This is really geared more for Vengeance than it is for Havoc. And it's just if you parry an attack or have one of your attacks parried, you heal for 2% max health and you get 10 Fury back. But it's got a 5-second cooldown. The amount of Fury is very small. The healing's very small. It's very inconsistent. Incredibly low value. Situationally, you could take it in Raid just because there's a lot of talents you could drop, but it's almost no value. Next we have Pursuit, and this is what makes our Mastery increase our movement speed. Now, this is an incredibly good talent point. I know a lot of people talk about dropping it, but imagine that this talent point, Red, increases your movement speed by 23%. That's how much I'm getting with the current amount of Mastery that I have, or it's actually 21.1. I guess I'm getting a little bit more from being a Night Elf. I think that gives you 2%. 21% move speed for a single talent is incredibly high value. I take Pursuit in every scenario. It's just very good to have. I wouldn't recommend dropping that. Next is Soul Rending. This is the crux of our survivability. 10% leech, so 10% of the damage that we deal is healed to us. And in Metamorphosis, that includes from demonic windows for I-Beam, you get an extra 10% leech. I mentioned earlier, leech ticks every 1.1 seconds, and it's just the percentage of damage that you dealt. And if you are at max health, leech will not trigger, which means if you're doing a bunch of damage at max health and then you get hit, leech will not start triggering and incurring until after you've lost that health. So it's not as strong as it sounds outright. It causes a lot of overhealing and a lot of times where it won't start building until after you've taken damage. But it's still an incredibly good point. Also, a fun fact, this was supposed to be nerfed to 6/12% coming into the War Within with all the other leech nerfs across the game, and they simply forgot to do it after putting it in multiple patch notes. Next, we have Infernal Armor. It just increases your armor by a percentage. This is actually per immolation or a stack. So with a fire inside, the fact that we can have multiple immoros up, if you have 4 or 5 of these up at once, it multiplicatively increases your armor. So if you have 2 stacks of this and it's 20% per immora, it multiplies it by 1.2 every single stack you have. Which means you can get up to pretty high amounts of armor, but it's not an incredible amount of gain, and typically almost no physical mechanics are reduced by armor at the moment, especially in raid. So this only really helps if you do rip for like a melee swing, which it can be useful for, but you have to commit 2 points to it, and you have to find a second point to swap out the talent that we normally take, Lost in Darkness. And that is the next point. All this does is make Spectral Sight, which is our button that lets us see mobs and through walls. It makes it last 5 seconds longer. Or sorry, it has a 5-second reduced cooldown, so 25 seconds instead of 30, and it doesn't reduce your move speed, so you have full move speed when you press it. Spectral Sight is not that useful of a button, but you can see invisible mobs with it, and you can. There's no examples this season. I guess if you're thinking of Visions in Stormwind, you can Spectral Sight to see the invisible mobs in Old Town, and you can even imprison or stun them while they're invisible. That's really all that it is useful for in any kind of real content. The reason that we talent into this is because you need to get down to the talents below it, and you have to either take this or Infernal Armor. And if you go through Infernal Armor, you need to drop a point somewhere else in your talent tree, which is very difficult to do in most scenarios, because you need to run Consume Magic to take Aura of Pain, and you don't want to drop your Interrupt range. Next, we have Fellfire Haste. This is just Fell Rush increases your movement speed by 10% after Fell Rushing. The problem with this talent is it doesn't stack with other movement speed effects, so if, for example, you get something like a Wind Rush or a Roar, this won't even trigger. You will not get that 10% in a lot of scenarios. The same thing, competitive talent points, and it doesn't really gain you much. It's not at all times, unlike Pursuit right above it. It's less than half the value when it is up. But something to note is move speed isn't outright useful for Havoc, because when you glide, you actually glide at 160% movement speed. Regardless of what your move speed is, if you get a really fast effect, and say you are running at 200% move speed, you'll actually slow down when you hit glide. But if you're running at 120% or even at 100%, your glide's going to take you at 160% move speed, and it's always faster to run around and jump glide. Next, we have Illidari Knowledge. This is a simple, always taken node. It reduces your magic damage taken by 5%. Incredibly good for a single talent point. Magic damage is the core way that you're going to take damage in World of Warcraft in pretty much any scenario. So we always run that. We have Demonic. This is what makes it so when you cast I-Beam, you enter demon form for 5 seconds. That's 5 seconds after you're done dealing damage, so it will keep refreshing Demonic to 5 seconds while you're I-Beaming, and then you have 5 seconds to use your empowered abilities. Again, Spec doesn't really work without this talent. It's one of the few that are a major DPS increase. There's no scenario you'd ever not be running Demonic. We have Will of the Illidari. Much like Illidari Knowledge, it's just a survivability node. 5% max health. You're going to take it in every scenario. Plus, you also need it to run down to Quicken Sigils. Otherwise, you'd have to run through Precise Sigils, which you could do. Precise Sigils makes it so that instead of placing your sigils yourself, or being able to macro them to place them at your cursor, they automatically place on your target. This can be incredibly useful. I don't have it in recommended builds because you have to lose a talent point somewhere else, but if you want to run Precise Sigils to not have to think about placing them, it can be good to do. The only problem is if a target's actively moving, it can miss, and on specifically Gallywix's tier, Precise Sigils, while he's in the middle, will make it drop down to the bottom of the hole and not actually hit him. There could be a couple other weird scenarios with it, but those are the main problems with this talent point. And again, it's just kind of competing when we don't have all the points that we would like. Next, we have Internal Struggle. It's just 4.5% mastery. One of the few points, again, that give us a significant DPS increase. You always want to run this. It's very good. Next, we have Darkness. This is our raid cooldown. So the way that Darkness works is any friendly target standing within the radius gets a buff, and the buff makes it so they have a 15% chance when they get hit to not take the damage that they got hit by. Even if it's a hit for, say, 20 million and they have 10 million health, it will prevent the damage and show up in healing, but they won't actually die. The damage will never have happened. The problem with Darkness is it's incredibly RNG. So on a lot of mechanics, not only do you have to have people stacking it, it's only a 15% chance to avoid that damage. So if you're trying to use this on like a single hit, even in a raid group of 20 people, you're likely only going to be blocking this mechanic on about 4 people. If that, 3, I guess, is actually average. It's an incredibly low chance, and where it does work is mechanics that hit multiple times very quickly. This tier 1 arm bandit, he has the fire coin where he just shoots your raid every half second for a long time. It could be good for a mechanic like that where it's going to be pretty consistently getting people across your group. In Mythic Plus, this is doubled though. Instead of 15% chance, it's 30%. Same issue, does not work as a defensive on one-shot mechanics. If someone's going to die to the hit, you can't use it as a group wide to guarantee that they're going to live because it's just a 30% chance. But on any sort of dot or rot mechanic, it is incredibly powerful, having a 30% chance on every single hit to not take that damage. It is a 5-minute cooldown that can be dropped to 3, or you can increase the duration from 8 seconds to 11, but those notes are, again, competitive. The one thing I will say with Darkness 2 is the animation makes it pretty hard to see effects on the ground under them sometimes. So often there are scenarios in Raid and Mythic Plus where it's a detriment to drop, and that's something you kind of need to learn as you go through. Next, we have Soul Sigils. This talent is a must-take for all drop G because it causes their sigils to spawn souls. It's if you successfully use the sigil. So if you sigil Misery on a boss that's immune to sigil Misery, you won't get a soul. But Sigil of Flame, it'll spawn you a soul. Sigil of Spite will spawn an extra soul. And Sigil of Misery, if it does fear a mob, it will spawn you a soul. This is just good for extra souls towards Eldrachi and Reaver's Glaives, and something that makes you want to hit those buttons actively pretty much on cooldown. Next, after Soul Sigils, we have Quicken Sigils. This just makes it so Sigils activate 1 second faster. Normally, they have a 2-second charge time. Quicken Sigils brings that down to a 1 second, and that goes for all Sigils. After 1 second, they explode, and their effects happen at that time based on the mobs that are standing in it when it goes off. There's Erratic Fellheart, and this is just 10% cooldown reduced off of Fell Rush per point. This is another node that was supposed to be nerfed to 8/15%, and the nerf never went through, although the reason it was getting nerfed also got changed. That was just an interesting fun fact that didn't happen. All it does is brings the cooldown of Fel Rush from 10 seconds down to 8 with both points, and nothing else. It doesn't affect our damage really in any way at the moment, since Fel Rush is just used as a mobility tool. So the only reason you would ever take this is if you're playing Collective Anguish below it, which I'll get to in a moment. As I mentioned for Darkness, you do have a choice note here, and you can either extend the duration of Darkness, keeps it a 5-minute cooldown but it lasts 11 seconds, or you can drop it to a 3-minute cooldown and it only lasts 8 seconds. These can be good in Mythic Plus. In Raid, I don't really recommend them. It's just not a valuable point in a Raid combat scenario. We have Rush of Chaos, which is more or less a must-take. This is the reason Metamorphosis is now a 2-minute cooldown for Havoc at all times. It would be a 3-minute without Rush of Chaos. It just takes a minute off the cooldown. We have Demon Muzzle, and this is anytime you hit an enemy with a Sigil, and including if the Sigil fails. So if you Sigil a Misery a boss, it will apply Demon Muzzle. They deal 8% reduced magic damage to you. So if a mechanic's going to hit you for 100,000 damage, it'll hit you for 92,000 instead. This is good just as a bit of passive DR in most scenarios. However, in really high Mythic Plus keys, there might be situations where you need to play around this, but it does only work on magic damage, not on physical. And I will note with this, if you use Not Even Close for Mythic Plus, Ortimus website where you can put in your defensives, this actually is listed as reduces all damage by 8% on the website. And I just want to note that it does not work on physical damage, despite the website saying it does, and it will give you the wrong output. We have Flames of Fury. This increases the damage of Sigil of Flame by 70%. This is both the initial hit as well as the dot. And this also does work on Sigil of Doom for Felsguard, which is the enhanced version. And you also generate 2 additional Fury per target hit. The Fury per target hit is not really that relevant. However, the 70% increased damage on Sigil is pretty nice because that's a button that we hit pretty much on cooldown for the Soul Generation as Eldrachi, and you will hit it as well for Felsguard, especially Sigil of Doom, which does an additional 30% more damage than Sigil of Flame. And down to the capstones. This is the best nodes in the tree. You can only ever take 2 of the 3. You don't have enough points in the bottom gate to ever get down and take another one. You'll only ever have enough points to get 1. So, or sorry, not 1, to get 2. The first one is Collective Anguish. And this is every time you I-beam, you get a second Demon Hunter that pops up beside you and cast Fell Devastation. It deals fire damage, and it heals you for an amount. The amount's not actually correct here. It heals you for more than 20,000. One thing I will note with Collective Anguish is the animation of the demon that spawns beside you is fake. I've had it asked before, like, can you turn, or do you have to worry about where it's looking? You don't. If you press I-beam and then you turn 180 degrees around, the Fell Dev will be hitting in a cone in front of you. It does have a shorter range than I-beam, but it does follow the way that you are looking, so you don't have to worry about where that demon looks when you first press I-beam. Next, we have the Hunt. With Eldrachi, you have an extra benefit on the Hunt, as well as the fact that this is the best tuned of the buttons. And it also counts as a charge, as well as being good single target damage, applies a dot. It also gives you a bit of leech benefit, where you heal for 10% of the damage that you deal to your hunted target for 20 seconds. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown. The cast is hasted. It's a 1-second cast. Hunt has an incredibly long 50-yard range on its charge as well. Now, the only problems with it are there are some paving issues where if the ground is a bit weird, it might just tell you path not found. And if you're rooted, it will let you start the cast, but it will fail to cast every time if you're still rooted when the cast finishes. As Eldrachi, on top of that, casting the Hunt will generate you a Reaver's Glaive. So if you currently have a Reaver's Glaive on hand, it will not do that and you get nothing out of it, which is why you always want to spend your Reaver's Glaive before you press the Hunt. For Felskard, there is no bonus interaction, but it is still the best tune to the capstones, so you do always take it. And the last one is Sigil of Spite. This is the one that's in contention with Collective Anguish. Collective Anguish is taken for Felskard, and Sigil of Spite is taken for Eldrachi. The reason this is taken for Eldrachi is because the sigils with it. This gives you 3 soul fragments, which is half of a Reaver's Glaive. And because of soul sigils, it'll spawn a 4th. So you actually get 4 sigils every time you press this. It does pretty decent damage, a little bit less than what Collective Anguish does, but it's close enough that for Eldrachi, this is far ahead when you consider the impact of the extra souls. Whereas for Felskard, you're better off just playing Collective Anguish, which is going to do slightly more with a little bit better survivability on your I-Beam. That is everything in the Demon Hunter tree. Again, the next video will go over the Havoc tree, and then I'll have one going over our hero talents for both Eldrachi Reaver and for Felskard, and that will include all of their interactions. So thank you for watching today. Hopefully you learned something. Leave a comment below if you like this kind of content or if there's anything that you did learn. And I'd appreciate any likes on the videos, or if you would subscribe to my channel if you like my content. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.